Hi, I'm Gabriel Spatonic, and I just had a fascinating conversation with Dean Abramson, the co-founder of RP1, all about what the metaverse actually is, what the future of the spatial internet actually looks like. And we got into some interesting tokenomics, as well as just what the future of Web3 actually looks like. So tune in, super exciting. You're revolutionizing the way that we see the internet today. And I wanted to kind of throw that at you and hear more about it.
Well, we'd like to think so, but first, Gabriel, thanks for having us. I appreciate
Absolutely.
you taking the time to meet with us. So yeah, we've been working on this for a very long time, and we believe we've got a revolutionary product that will bring the metaverse to life.
Whoa.
So
That's a big statement.
so your question could be, well, what is the metaverse, right?
What is the exactly?
A
lot of people asking that question.
That's a very dangerous question to answer, because you ask a dozen people what the metaverse is, you're going to get 13 different answers. So I'll try to give you our view of what the metaverse is through an analogy to something that we already can relate to, which is the technologies we've been living in for the last 30 years. From the web browser, the World Wide Web, and the internet. So how would you separate the internet from the World Wide Web? Because a lot of people have this as a sticky point. So if you don't know, that's okay.
Yeah, I would struggle answering that question.
So most people would say that the World Wide Web is the internet.
That's what I would have guessed.
Okay, so we would say that the internet is all the storage and transmission and data and servers and routers and switches and fiber, all the backbone of how information moves around the world. But there's a lot of it, and it's all random. Question?
That's the internet?
That's the internet.
Okay. And can you actually use the three fingers?
Yes.
Because that helps me and hopefully the audience as well.
So we have the internet, and that's where everything is stored. And it's just a loose network of all around the world, fiber going everywhere under the sea, satellites and sky, millions and billions of servers and electronic components, and countless files and data storage, right? So everyone knows what the internet is. The World Wide Web, the way I would distinguish that is it's the things that you interact with through your web browser, right? So you've got a web browser on your computer, you've got a web browser on your phone, you've got lots of apps on your phone that act like single-serving web pages, right? So if you go to your phone, you open up Amazon's app, that's just like going to Amazon's web page.
Gotcha.
A little bit more refined, right? So the way that you interact with the internet, that interaction is the World Wide Web. It's everything you see in the internet through your browser. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. We got the internet, all the back-end stuff, all the technology.
The electronics,
right?
Transmission.
We have the web browser, and then we have the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web is what allows us to ultimately interact.
It allows you to see the internet.
It's like it's kind of like the physical. It's like the visual manifestation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's important to note that no one owns the World Wide Web.
Okay.
And different people own different pieces of the internet. Like a data center will own, AWS will own a whole bunch of servers, and a whole, an entire data center, and there's actual physical hardware, and someone needs to own that.
But that part would be part of the internet, right?
That's part of the internet, right? But no one owns the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is effectively owned and shared by everyone. There's a single World Wide Web shared by everyone.
Okay.
But anyone can contribute. There's no gatekeeper. No one can say, you can't put something on the World Wide Web. As soon as you place a file into the internet and a web browser picks it up, it becomes part of the World Wide Web, which sits right in the middle.
Okay, fascinating. Okay,
so
that's great.
To relate that to the future now,
we
think at RP1 that the future looks a lot like the past, but spatial and three-dimensional. So we don't view the current 3D sites out there like Roblox, very popular, Fortnite, Horizons, these 3D worlds, we don't see them as different metaverses. They're just applications that are 3D. So in order for the metaverse to exist, it's the same layer, right? So we have a spatial internet, which is very similar. It's just a superset of the internet. It's the internet plus a few extra standards and protocols and a bunch of different services that support spatially oriented applications, okay? And then you need a metaverse browser, just like you need a web browser. So how many web browsers are there? There's Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox. There's a dozen of them or so, right? So there's going to be a few different manufacturers of metaverse browsers. RP1, we believe, were the first. And when you open up your Metaverse browser and you start viewing all the content that's placed in the spatial internet, you end up with the Metaverse.
Okay.
Just like when you open up a web browser and you start viewing all the content in the internet, you end up with the World Wide Web.
Wow.
So just like there's one World Wide Web, there's one Metaverse. But everyone can contribute to it. There's no gatekeeper.
Okay.
And so all we need people to do is to understand what are the new special protocols and standards that we add to the spatial internet. We combine that with a brand new type of a spatial metaverse browser, and then we end up with the metaverse. So in simple terms, the metaverse is kind of like it's the blending of reality and virtuality. It's no one single piece of software. Just like the World Wide Web is comprised of 1 billion websites and 1 billion different services, the spatial internet is the metaverse is 1 billion different services in 1 billion different spatial locations.
Wow.
Both real and imaginary.
Wow, that was the most the most complex, detailed. I mean, you broke it down. When I say complex, I mean like you really just described what I think so many people have been wondering about with the metaverse. And I think, I mean, what's interesting is like this didn't exist before, so that it makes sense that people had all these questions.
There was a period of time, the internet was created in 1983. But the web browser didn't exist until 1989. And we're in this gap right now where we have the spatial internet. We know all these spatial components. We have real-time services. We have 3D objects. But we don't have a metaverse browser. So during this time of the internet, we had companies like America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy come up and would present different versions of AOL would say, oh no, we're the internet. But they weren't. They were just a piece of software that gave you access to a peek into the internet. But when the browser came along, all these guys got wiped off the planet because the browser made it possible to now view the real World Wide Web.
Wow.
And oddly enough, the first browser, do you know what it was?
Was it Mozilla? I don't know.
It was before Mozilla. It was called World Wide Web. And that's where the name World Wide Web came from. It was taken directly off the name of that browser.
Interesting, but they're different.
Well, the World Wide Web as a concept took off so much that the browser had to change its name to something else because people were confusing it.
Fascinating. Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so, I mean, the first thought that just like question that I had was I used to interact. I was part of like the Board API Club's ecosystem. So I'm curious, and I'm curious, where will all these different quote unquote what they describe as metaverses, where did those fit into kind of like the future of the metaverse?
So we're hoping. And we're proposing a series of standards, and they're going to be open to the world, and we want everyone to understand them and help us build them. And once you have a standard that you can build to, everyone can start developing. So the standard that broke the World Wide Web apart was HTML. So before the web browser, there was no HTML. And so when the web browser created, HTML defined a document format that anyone could create. And once you created a document in that format, any web browser could come along, scoop up that document, and render it. The same thing for the spatial internet. Once we define these sets of standards of protocols and document formats and other things for spatial objects and services, anyone can start developing these services and objects, put them into the spatial internet, and a metaverse browser can now scoop those up and render them. So no matter where you are in the world, spatially, if you walk into a grocery store, if you walk into a hotel, go to the airport, go to a museum, spatially, your AR glasses will know where you are, or if you're not present and you want to visit them from remotely with a VR headset, you can be put somewhere spatially, and everything around you will be streamed to you.
Wow. And so who makes the rules of the spatial internet?
Who makes the rules of the World Wide Web? So at first, you get some companies together that start building prototype versions of this. RP1 has already built a prototype world and browser that allows us to do this, but we'd like to get some more bigger companies involved. And we've been making a lot of progress in that regard. So once you get these standards that start to formulate and you get a product that's working, eventually that will either become the de facto standard, or in the case of the World Wide Web, which kind of wandered aimlessly for a little while until W3C picked it up and started really rigorously standardizing everything, then we could really make some progress. So it would be our hope that a new standards body, a worldwide standards body, not related to the World Wide Web, but some globally accepted standards body will come along and say these are the standards. But
Right.
in the meantime, I think we can work with a few companies to create some de facto standards that really work.
Okay, fascinating. So now let's get back to what you guys are building. So you guys are building a browser, and you guys are building a spatial internet. You guys are building a spatial interface.
So we're building, we're introducing something called the spatial fabric, is what
Spatial fabric,
what we
right.
were referring to when we were talking earlier. And so the spatial fabric just provides the mapping, the coordinate space that it isn't needed in the World Wide Web. The closest thing to it would be DNS, right? So if you type in a name, you would go to a registrar, you get a domain name like RP1.com, and that translates into an address. That's the closest analogy I can give. But in a spatial internet, in a metaverse, you actually need coordinates, you need locations because it's all 3D and spatial. I need to walk down the street, I need to go visit some planet that we've invented somewhere out in the universe. And so the fabric provides that mapping. That's the easiest way to think about the fabric. It's just the map of how everything's laid out. Because two other sites, Amazon.com and Google.com, there's no relationship. They're two completely different tabs in a browser. But in the metaverse, everything is related spatially, so you need to define a location. And the fabric provides that. So RP1's fabric, we have something special, and that's where we excel. Is we have scalability that no one else on the planet can achieve. And so we're about 200 to 500 times more scalable than the next closest site that we know about, which means we need 200 to 500 times fewer servers to do the work, and we can create worlds that are infinite. And so the typical, depending on, if you get like a low fidelity world like Fortnite, you can put about 100 people into the world before you have to shard it. Are you familiar with sharding?
I actually was looking it up earlier today, but for the people.
So sharding is in Fortnite, when you play a game, you can put 100 people into the game. After that game fills up, you have to create a completely separate game, and the next 100 people go in there. So if there's 6 million people playing Fortnite simultaneously, they're doing it in 100 player shards.
Right.
So you end up with 60,000 shards. Did I do my math correct? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
In a high fidelity scenario, limits are typically around 20 people per shard. So in something like Horizons, you'll end up, high fidelity being you have full control of your hands, your arm movements, your head movements. It's called 6DoF. So you have 6 degrees of freedom.
Okay.
And voice. And so nothing is pre-programmed or pre-animated. So when you get into that level, your shards are typically around 20. And that we know of, there aren't too many, if any, companies that have broken the 20 barrier. We have a setup right now. We have about 30 servers. We can do about 100,000 people in a single shard, but that's only limited by the amount of hardware that we've purchased. So we expect that we would be able to, with more hardware, create a single shard metaverse that can handle the entire population of the planet.
Wow.
And that's where we excel. That's where our core competency, our technology is focused on.
Wow. So like, let's say right now you could hold a space or hold a game for 100,000 people to interact and all together at the same time.
So yeah, there's two really good reasons why having infinite shards are important. One of them is to get a large number of people watching an event together, and that could be really exciting. We could put 100,000 people in a stadium. You could have a performer who can actually play to the entire crowd. You can do the wave. You would hear, if someone screamed or heckled all the way across the stadium, you'd hear it directionally. We can handle all of that sound and mix it so that you could hear it. So that is one way that people like to. It's very, very common to go there. Like, how big of a stadium can you create? But the other thing, which I think is more important, is if you shard people into groups of 20, I have no capacity to meet with someone else in a different shard. There's no communication level. I can't see them. We're both occupying the same space, but in like different times or different, right? So let's say you're at an event. I just came from an event at a pizza place, and there had to be 40, 50 people there. So if it were sharded up into groups of 20, that would mean that if we all had AR glasses on in the future, let's say 10 years from now, it's going to be very common, we believe, you'd have to shard people up, and you wouldn't be able to have the same, you wouldn't have this, you wouldn't be able to share the experience with everyone that you're with.
Would that mean in that example, would that mean there's like 2 people per experience?
In other people's shards, it might be limited to a dozen or 20 people in a shard, but in our world, everyone could There
Wow.
you go. So it's like when you want to meet someone or when you want to find someone on the internet with the same experience as you, or the same thing that you're interested in, you want to go to a bulletin board, or you go to a social media site. Discovery, being able to discover people that have the same interest as you that you want to communicate with, that's really broken down. If you're sharded with only 20 people, then you can only share your experience or find people among 20 to communicate with.
Right.
But if the shard is infinite, even if it's not about seeing every single person in the world at the same time, but at least you have that connection.
And
so
they're
that
coexisting in the same.
What would Facebook or Instagram or TikTok be like if when you joined Facebook, you were put into a small version of Facebook with only 19 other people? And then next, the 21st person that joined was put into a completely separate version of Facebook.
Right.
That would be no fun.
Yeah, no fun at all.
You can't. The most followers you could have would be 19.
Right.
Right. And so, and if your mom wants to follow you and she's in a different shard, so she can't even find you because she's sharded up with someone else.
Wow.
So by creating this infinite space, you at least have the ability to connect with every single person on the planet. If you have a pair of AR glasses in the future, your view of the world through the AR glasses is going to be much more advanced, and we believe even more addicting than your phone, right? So who's not attached to their phone? I bring my phone with me everywhere I go. And when you have your glasses on, you have this real-time stream of the world presented to you virtually. And it can, like if you're at a basketball game and someone shoots a ball, your glasses can project the trajectory of the ball. So that's one way that your glasses can interact with the real world. If you forgot where you put your keys, but your glasses saw you put your keys down, you can ask your glasses where your keys are, and it'll draw a path to you.
Well,
But you can also bring virtual items into the world. Like I could have a virtual pet sitting here. My dog is at home. I left her with a sitter. But if I wanted to in my AR glasses in the future, I could bring a virtual dog here. And if you had your AR glasses, you'd see my dog here too. And the dog would be controlled by AI. So I could give my dog its completely unique personality. It could be super hyper. It could be really calm. Or if I had a cat and say we have this drink up here, if there were a virtual drink sitting right next here, my cat would obviously jump up and knock it off because that's what cats like to do. But a virtual cat could knock off a virtual drink. So all sorts of really interesting things. And the great thing is we don't have to invent these things. Just like the way the World Wide Web came about, it wasn't because one company said, oh, I know all these wonderful things.
Right.
Like America Online could have never said, oh, we'll invent 100 million or a billion different items. But when you get the entire world together, the world can come up with all these magnificent things that you could never think of as an individual, and create them to create this metaverse that we can't even imagine.
Amazing. So how do other builders integrate with RP1?
So other builders would build to the standard of the metaverse, the standards of the spatial internet that we're proposing.
And how far are we away from that?
We could be weeks to months away from that. We've got a prototype browser. It's going to be open to the public, I would hope about 2 weeks from now, but I think I've been saying 2 weeks for the last 2 months.
Okay.
So it should be any moment. So once we have this open world, you can come in, you can visit it on your own. It'll be open 24/7. It'll be persistent.
So I did that twice actually. It was really cool. I love the demo. That was amazing.
There's a number of. What did you think of? What was your favorite part of the demo?
I mean, it was cool that I could kind of fly.
Yeah,
I like that.
Had you go all the way into space?
All the way to space, and it was like you could see where. I just remember it was very intuitive, and it was like real. It was like real space. Like when I went up, like we were in one part and they were in another part. And you could see it from outer space, and then I like traveled to where I was originally.
Yeah, so
that makes any sense.
Two of the biggest compliments that we get, or the things that people comment about the most are its openness. You can literally travel from any spot to any other spot.
Yep.
You're not required to teleport. Obviously, teleportation is quicker. But the fact that you can fly up from a point in, let's say, London, you can go all the way up in the sky, go into space, you can watch Earth spinning, you can see the shadows of the sun on Earth, you can fly to a different planet. We haven't programmed anything beyond our solar system yet, but we will have other galaxies. We will have a full universe of stuff to build. And then you can fly all the way back down to Earth and land in Los Angeles. So that aspect of its openness is one of the things that we get a lot that people really enjoy. And the other thing is the audio. The spatial audio, being surrounded by 500 or 1,000 people, is really interesting.
It was really cool how like when someone was speaking, I was next to them, I could hear them, and as I walked away, it like diminished. So
Yeah.
it was
And it's all real time, stereo, left, right ear, everything is around you.
super cool.
Yeah.
I guess I remember I was speaking with David before, and you guys have an element of there's like zero scarcity.
So a lot of I'll say Web3 projects are building on a model of scarcity. That is the core fundamental part of the model. So take something like Decentraland or Sandbox, and they limit the amount of space. They make it purposefully scarce to drive up the price. And that increases revenue to the company, right? So if there's only so much land, get it quick, right? And they release it in small chunks. So it's part of the marketing strategy to get the most amount of money for a piece of land. And land prices could be $3,000 to $6,000 for a parcel that's about 100 meters by 100 meters, let's say. Our entire premise is that, like domain names, everything is abundant. So we've got, Earth has something like 18 billion acres of land, and that's on one planet. And so if we create a million planets, how much inhabitable land is there to sell? So we have effectively an infinite amount of land, and we're parceling it out like domain names. So domain name costs anywhere from $9 a year to $15 a year for the standard domain names. First come, first serve. Land on Earth, we're doing a digital twin, so unless you own that piece of land, you won't have access rights to it. But outside of Earth, or outside of our solar system, you can first come, first serve on any piece of land. And you can grab a piece of land for about the same as a domain name. Depends on the size of it, of course. If you're buying something the size of North America, it's going to be more expensive. But if you want to buy a piece of land, say to run your house on a private spatial fabric, it could be as little as $1 a year, right? So it's very easy for everyone to get into it.
Wow.
So yeah, a typical piece of land that's, I don't know, 100 meters by 100 meters by 100 meters would cost you $100 a year.
Wow.
That's 1 million cubic meters, which is more than most people need. 1 million cubic meters is actually pretty hard to fill up.
It sounds like a lot.
Yeah. Typically, say 100 by 100 by 20 meters would cost you $20 a year. That's fair. It's a lot cheaper than $6,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so where does blockchain, where does crypto come into all of this?
So we've had to invent a lot of technologies to make RP1 possible. The scaling technology is core. We have technology that we've invented and patented for dealing with universe size worlds. That was a trick and a half. We've got other technologies that deal with calculating orbits that we've patented that go all the way back to Kepler's law. We've got all sorts of technologies for dealing with avatars, for dealing with sound, for dealing with servers, whatever. So our token that we're creating is one of those components that we're adding into the world. So the core functionality of our company is not one of a token or a crypto company per se. There are a lot of companies out there like Filecoin that invented a really spectacularly complicated but useful mechanism for dealing with large amounts of long-term storage. I mean, unbelievable amount of engineering went into Filecoin. On the flip side, our engineering or our usefulness for the coin isn't in the coin itself. So we're actually using Hedera's fungible token API. We haven't invested in creating our own blockchain technology, but the token itself is unique. We can talk about that in a moment. And the token is just one of many components that we feel is going to be necessary for an open metaverse. And the primary thing that we feel is needed is a non-volatile coin. So we need a token that if you're going to go into a metaverse and we're going to have a common currency, which is not required in RP1. No one's required to use our token, but there are benefits to using it. And one of those, if I sell a product, a good or a service, and I accept that token, you don't want that token to drop overnight. You sold something for $100, you wake up the next day, it's 70,
right,
and your profit margin is completely gone because the market, went haywire. That low volatility is key. So we've designed some I won't say technology, but our concept, which we call a consumptive fair value token, keeps that token very non-volatile.
Gotcha. And so why did you guys choose to work with Hedera?
We chose Hedera because their their Hashgraph technology shares a lot of the same underlying principles of our technology in terms of efficiency. So we are hundreds of times more efficient than any other system on the planet like ours, and so is Hedera. They're the lowest energy cost per transaction. We also have a huge amount of scalability. Hedera's got a huge amount of stability. We want a fixed cost of transaction. We want that to be extraordinarily cheap, which there's 1/10 of a penny per transaction. They have extraordinarily high amount of throughput. They're also very scalable and, again, very, very energy efficient. So this is kind of it's not, I'd say being green is an energy efficient is a very big part of our core of our company's mission.
Wow.
So we think Hedera fits in quite well with that.
Amazing. I know we touched on blockchain, and you're working with Hedera. Tell me about the consumptive fair value token.
Okay, so this is something we've created.
Yeah.
It's a term that I don't think anyone's heard of, but I will explain it. So let's assume that there's a fair value token out there, one that you already know about, which would be the stable coins. And so if we consider stable coins to be a fair value token, meaning that the token itself has a fair value attached to it, a stable coin attached to the US dollar is worth either $1 or $0 if it becomes right. If for some reason the underlying the company that's managing it loses their becomes insolvent, then the token quickly goes to zero. But let's pretend it doesn't become insolvent. It's going to hang out at $1 plus or minus a tiny fraction. So what we're doing at RP1 is we're assigning a fair value to the token based on the goods and services we sell. So if we sell a good or service on RP1, we're going to accept a fair value of that token at $100, $100 US per one token. So if we sell you a good or service and it comes up to $20, you can pay us $20 or you can pay us 0.2 token, irrespective of what the exchange rate is on the market. So if it's trading for less than $100, you're going to get a discount on your goods or services.
Oh, interesting.
And so what we believe is that over time, if our customer base grows, as the product grows, the market will adapt to the fair value of that token. Because if you're getting, let's say someone says, I'll sell it for $90, then if you're going to be purchasing a good or service on RP1, someone might then say, well, I'll buy it for 91. And someone will say, I'll buy it for 92, all the way up to 100, because you're getting a discount. So we think the market will find that equilibrium.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty like, economics 101.
The consumptive value or the consumptive use of the token on RP1 is what gives it its fair value. And we will always honor that on RP1. So let me be clear, we're not an exchange.
Right.
You can't give us $100 and we'll give you a token back. We're just saying that when you pay for something on RP1, whatever your bill comes out to, you can pay it at that invoiced amount or the equivalent in RP at $100 to one token.
So when is the token launch going to be, and how can people get a hold of these tokens?
So we have a private round that's going on right now, and the private round the private round is at $15, which represents an 85% discount on the fair value of that token. And then after the private round is complete, which we don't think will last very long, we're going to start offering the tokens for sale at $25 on an exchange. It's not exactly formalized yet, so I can't say exactly which one, but we should be pretty close. Okay. And that would represent a 75% discount. And so we want to give our supporters a way to participate and get a discount for being an early supporter. And there's a finite number of those tokens. And once those tokens sell out, we're actually going to go to $50 and then $75 and $100. So eventually, as we step up, you will be able to get a discount on the goods and services that we're selling through RP1. That way, our supporters, they get some benefit from helping us out. We get the tokens into circulation, and then over a period of time, we would expect that the market will self-regulate near the fair value of the token.
Gotcha. Amazing. So you guys are launching around middle of March. What does that mean for the users, and how do people get involved?
So once we open up, anyone will be able to come in and check out RP1. You'll be able to experience what it feels like to be in a world that has a huge amount of scalability and a huge amount of people involved. You will one of the first things that we will offer will be a service that allows you to set up your own spaces or meetings. You can come in, you can create a meeting just like a Zoom link or like a Google meeting link, and you'll get a URL. You can give it to someone. They can come right in, just a click away. The great thing about RP1 and the great thing about using a browser is the barrier to entry is very, very low, right? If you're going into Roblox, you have to download Roblox. You have to wait for it all to come down. You have to install it. You got to create your account. You got to do all these steps to get into there before you can actually participate. But with the browser, you go right in. You go in through URL, click a link that says you accept, come in as a guest, and you're right in there. It literally takes you 5 seconds.
So I can start, instead of putting Zoom on my meetings, I can put RP1.
Yeah. And if you got a VR headset or a desktop computer or a phone, any device you can go in on, but it's spectacular in VR. And we will also be hosting AR meetings. So by using the pass-through device of let's say Quest 3, we could be having a meeting and it would be like I'd be able to see the whole room, and it would feel like, even if we're not in the same space, it would feel like we're in the same space together, which is really, really cool. So you can do that on your own. We're going to be adding in some games, and we're also going to be getting programmers to start building their own third-party independent services that will then inject into RP1, which will be the beginning of the metaverse. Just like the World Wide Web gave people the ability to create web pages, as people start building their own components and services, those will also go into RP1.
Wow.
And so people can get involved by reserving some land. We will not actually, and let me explain land. Land is nothing more than like grabbing a domain name. You have to have, in a spatial world, you have to have space. It's volumetric. So we have to know where you want to locate yourself. Two people cannot share or occupy the exact, two entities cannot own the same area, right? So you have to get your area first come, first serve, or if it's on Earth, it's reserved for people who own those spots already on Earth. And once you get that at, like we talked about, $10 a year or whatever that might cost, that is yours. And so people can start to reserve that, and that would help support us a great deal.
Okay.
And so if you reserve it using the token, you're getting the 75% discount if you can get your tokens at $25. Because we're still going to say, if you get 100 meter by, or 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by a meter tall, that's $100. If you give us a token that you bought on exchange for $25, then you just got a 75% discount on that.
Cool.
So you can either get 4 times as much land, or you can just save the money. But
Wow.
that really helps us, because we can then use funds of that advanced land purchase to go ahead and add more programmers and engineers on the team, which will help us build it out even quicker.
Wow. Okay. And how far do you think we are from really enjoying and interacting in the metaverse?
Yeah, I think by the end of this year, we're going to see some really spectacular innovations where people are going to put on a VR headset or a pair of AR glasses and find a new use for it that they really didn't understand or think was possible when they originally bought their glasses or headset. Because you typically, when you get a VR headset, you put it on, you're going to get some games, or you're going to play with it, or maybe go into Horizons or something like that. But once you start getting access to the browser, you realize that the entire metaverse is now open to you. Anyone can contribute to it. Just like the people who used to be in America Online saw this very narrow view of the internet. Once the World Wide Web came on, it just opened everything, and people got their eyes open. They're like, oh my God, I never knew that was possible. And so once the browser starts taking off, we think that developers will come in by the millions. Just like, there were two, the creation of the World Wide Web, the transition to mobile was the second biggest revolution of the internet, and we believe that the metaverse will be the third biggest revolution of the internet. I think this one will be bigger than the first two.
Wow. Okay.
And it will happen faster because everyone knows what this stuff is now.
Wow. Especially after the way you described it in the beginning.
Yeah. If you think about when the World Wide Web came out, no one really knew what the @ symbol was. No one understood email.
Right.
No one understood .com. What was .com? People didn't understand the concepts. Everyone understands it now. All the broadband didn't exist back then. Everyone's got broadband now. Everyone's got 4G, 5G, 7G is going to be out, soon. and everything is already in place right now to access the metaverse. So once people get a taste of it, I think it's just going to explode.
Dean, thank you so much for coming. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I learned a lot, and I look forward to following what you guys are up to for many years to come.
Thank you for having us. I enjoyed the conversation.
Brought to you by Hedera and Foresight Ventures.
Hey, what's up?
But it's not something Genzio is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a hive.
No, we do not understand that we do not want to have. Ladies and gentlemen.
Rebecca's Genzio Media House.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.